Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, and we're gonna geek out a lot about type. But I'm gonna try to make it, or try to make this presentation in a way that you can take something more than type from this. So there's like a lot of cross-pollination that happens like in this activity. Olá, sou português, sou de Albufeira. I'm from Albufeira, so it's like pretty close. My name is João Miranda. And we are quite lucky, right? Like, I think it's a pretty cool place. And it's a place where I grew up. There was like not a lot of things of what I'm talking about, like as specific as type design. As I mentioned before, it was not like as exposed there, but that was like some years ago. But that wasn't really a problem for that to happen. Anyway, so I work still mainly as a brand designer. I'm a freelancer. I've been a freelancer for maybe like five years, and I've been working with big names like Pentagram. I'm currently at Wolf Hollins, like Dixon Baxi. I work like for some clients, BBC as well. Like I work on the rebrand for Doctor Who, which has a really like super geek community, which is amazing. Like I never thought that I would see like my work on YouTube and someone just like to talk good and bad stuff about it. So that's like quite exciting. But today I'm talking about a passion that comes from many years and only until like recently started to materialize a little bit more as a business, or at least as that possibility, just like to shift from design and go to this focus. And back in the days when the pixels were like super big, as you can see in this photo, and as I mentioned before, like graffiti was at the root of what I perceived something that I wanted to do. Like that was like a comfort place, like of exploration. Graffiti specifically has like not that many rules. But then like when I went to uni, I started to be introduced to the other side of it, like calligraphy and whatnot. So I started to geek out in a much more legal way by doing like letterings, and I think it's a really interesting to see like how you can go from something that there's no goal apart from expressing yourself, and then there's like something that can convert to a contribution to society. Which I think graffiti is a great contribution, by the way. Sometimes you just need to trash a place for the city halls to do something about it, like to clean it or something. So this is already like some type work. So there's like a bit of an evolution that I felt that I wanted to do, like getting more into the technical bit. But then as a brand designer, I'm like, well, there will be designers using this, so I want to test this. I want to fuck around a little bit with the work that I'm doing and just like keep exploring, just like doing some animations. Some are like code generated, others are like in 3D, but just like understanding, since I'm developing fonts and fonts are a tool, I need to use those tools in different places as well, just to understand what I'm actually delivering. So that's like really important. So on a note, based on the talk that we had before, if you want to make a distinction between typeface and fonts, I would say that typeface is the soul and fonts are the tool. So it's effectively like a font file that you use. But when you're talking about a typeface, you're talking about the DNA that may be composed by different fonts. So that's been like my anchor to explain this. And then type, to me, can take like many expressions. Like here is just like this bubbly effect, but it is in its essence a letter. But then when you think about letters, something that got me excited, and that's why like now today I'm talking about Tudotype, is that like you can have questions like what is the best letter to seed? It's not like a question that you usually do, but then that's like when you can start to unchart some territories, just like to get it out of the context of like commercial work. And then like through technology, like I actually did this illustration that says, which I think it's like the universal way to say that something is tasty. This was actually done with a variable font, which has like a technical approach that allows it to expand like from a lightweight to a bold weight. And I'm starting to geek out a bit, so bear with me. But it's mainly what this technology allows you to do is to not have steps. So you don't have the light, the regular and the bold. You can have everything in between, everything mixed up, and that brings a lot of graphic potential. And also, like from a legibility point of view, you have more control. Yeah, like letterings. But I have like 7 projects to talk. There's a lot of stuff. There's about 120 slides that I'm going to go through. It's going to be like light. So I've started like with a heavy bit, like where we actually go really into detail. And then another type of challenge that I can receive as a type designer is to customize some of my fonts. So this is a typeface that I'm still designing, but a friend/client of mine, he got interested in it, and he wanted to have something for a project that I was working on, which was an hotel in Manila, in Philippines. And with this, he wanted the typeface that I've designed, but with a different proportion. So he wanted it to be like much wider. But then obviously, when we were talking about typefaces, we were talking about like a single weight, like a light will have like at least 250 glyphs. You can have a lot more. And then if you have like a bold and regular, you can get into the thousands quite easily. So just like understanding how do you do that system and why you are doing that system, because they don't want to expand that work too much. So one of the things that was like really important for them was like thinking about the optical size. And I think it's a really interesting exercise to do in this room, because if you blow up this one, like to make it the size of this, like this line is actually much thicker, but then this performs a lot better at this scale than that one, which is the exact same weight. So just that there's like a relationship that has to be retained, and it has to be fit for purpose, and in this case, the purpose is the size. So this was the original drawing, this was the expanded, and the master that I was working on was like this one. So you can see that these components, they all relate to each other, and they have like a number, they have like the same number of like anchor points that you use like to draw these. And it's a bit like a rubber band. If you have like a rubber band with 4 points, you can just like stretch it, right? So you can just like move things around and have like a different sort of square, but it's still like your 4 fingers. If you add a finger in between and you have like 5 points, then things won't work from a technical point of view. So just like sizes and how like this thickness can have like an impact, but then like it's important for him, because he has a design agency, to explain to the client how the concept still permeates through the typeface, like what are the details, and why did we choose this typeface and to invest in a typeface that is exclusive for us. So it ended up getting into a family of 11 weights, and then yeah, I just have like some words. So I do have a lot of slides, but it will be easy. Like a lot of them will just be like for us to look at letters. And the beauty of this presentation is that you don't have to read. You can focus on the shape. That's very intentional. Like here, like I wouldn't ask anyone to read this. It would be like quite awkward. But it's like you get the idea of like a typeface, not a font, right? You get that there's like this tail there that is also like here in the 3, in the G, in the ampersand, in the F. Like those are like the kind of bits of DNA that are like really important from a typographic point of view, but also you can expand this to a design system and everything else that you can do. It's like, how can I make this component like repeatable and systemized in order to be able to deliver a project for someone. So yeah, these are like some weights that were developed. And this was a typeface that I designed, and they wanted to work on this, or me to work on this. But then it can also happen to, like for a client who already have like an idea of what they want. They already have like some drawings, but they don't have like a working font, so they need some support on that end. The client is Jones Knowles Ritchie, JKR. It's like a big branding agency based in London. They did like big rebrands like Burger King and Dunkin' Donuts and and non-food related stuff as well. But it's not my company, so I don't have to get into that detail. And they have this amazing client that they want to solve like a problem, which is to bring like agriculture to the center of our cities. So currently in the UK, they already have like these sort of farms at a much smaller scale at Marks and Spencer. So imagine that you go to Continent and you have an area where the lettuce is actually growing there. So it's pretty relevant because you don't have to spend energy to bring those things there. So they wanted to have like a typeface that was not to communicate so much like long bits of text, but more like keywords. So this was like the original that they had. This is a redesign. It seemed that like, why are they paying you to do whatever you do? Like, you know, that probably could work. But then if you look in detail, like there's issues with spacing, there's like issues with the proportions of the letter, and it's the kind of things that if you have creases on your t-shirt, it's probably fine, but it might give, you know, people might start to construct a wrongful opinion about yourself, and just like type can be very much like an extra care, but then it can also solve like issues like if you have this E at a really smaller scale, it can be misled by an O because this I will just like disappear. So how do you do like that balance? And through the process, we sometimes have to change what we think is right. So they were really convinced that this was the answer or the style. Was what had to be redesigned, but we end up going for something completely different. And as a fun fact, I think it's Adidas that is all typed in Futura, but the last letter is closer to Helvetica. So it's fine. Sorry that the color is not coming through greatly, but this is just like to basically say that they're like common components, but they have to be adjusted because of the nature of the letters. So for instance, the N will go until here, but in the M, you have to compress that area a little bit more. Otherwise, you have like two arches and it looks like you're in Terreiro do Passo or like a big place where it just would take like too much space, and you don't want and don't need that. Another thing is like icons. Like those 5 icons that I'm going to talk about after is something that they wanted to have as well as part of the working typeface. And there's like a technical approach to do that, which is already like more common with numbers. So you have like these type of numbers, but then you have features in the typeface that you can activate to have these type of numbers, which are called like old style, which give like a different rhythm to the reading experience. But then you can do things that are like quite fun, which is like, I want to write logo and I want the logo to appear like inline the text. So I did a feature that by default, every time that you write plain or tree or zero past or infarm or logo, these glyphs will be replaced. So it's almost as if you're talking with emojis. And it also means I didn't have to ship different files to a client. You give them the font, and they have freedom to operate that typeface. So now we're going to go back to Asia, like to that massive, like ludicrous building, which is another like fancy project, and it's so fancy that they actually want to do like a book to the people that are going to buy a flat there, and they are basically like studying the paper paste on how they're going to print the book. So they're actually working on the paper paste. So it goes to that detail, to that level of craft. And it's also like the level of detail that comes through the references that they shared with me, which is like something that feels like really elegant, that doesn't have to have a lot of like artifices, super simple. I wouldn't say exactly minimal, but like light. You see that there's not a lot of black here. It's predominantly white. And these were some of the exercises that they did and that they shared with me, the explorations that they did, fonts that they liked. And I end up discarding this as a visual. So I didn't really reference my work in someone else's work. So to me, it's also important to do something that is like ownable, because I don't want to get into intellectual property issues, but also like if they're paying for something that's absolutely crafted for them, it should come from scratch or be made from scratch. So Illyria, it's the name of the place, and as you can see, it's really, really minimal. Like the level of details that I got here was just like, if it has to feel like as if it's chiseled, as if someone has sculptured these letters by hand. So that was like the idea of like that extra craft, that everything is like imponent, everything will have room to breathe. So the letters that will be there will communicate a lot. They will do a lot of work. So like it should also be super elegant. So I went a step further and I proposed like, what if we have this language a little bit more expanded? What if we have specific letter pairs? So if you're writing a double L, maybe you can go beyond the double L and have something that now it feels ownable. Now you have like a different rhythm. Now it's something that feels almost like playful, but at the same time really elegant. So it's not like you don't have to use a bold weight to contrast or to bring more attention to what you're doing. Maybe you can just like revisit and do something more like this, like thinking about kerning pairs. So we're gonna geek out a bit again, but this is super visual. It's a video and everything. And with this typeface, you can actually write in Roman numeration. So you just need to activate an Illustrator. So every time you're writing numbers, it's actually typing in like ancient Roman. So not sure if they use that, but I don't think that I will have that many projects where it justifies to do something as classical. So there you go. Like, there's a lot of things that you can do with technology nowadays, and that is like quite simple. So say no to stencil. This is a project that I was approached by a Portuguese artist called Diogo Machado. He's also known as At Fool, and he does like these beautiful like patterns that are very much like based in azulejo. But then when you look deep down, there's like little eyes and monsters. Everything is like really weird, so he invites you to go like really close. So he's a stencil artist in its essence. So when you think about stencil fonts, typically you have like a really defined idea of what a stencil font is. But when we were talking, we knew that we didn't want this crap or this, and definitely like not this, you know. Just because you can spray paint something, yes, it is a stencil, but a stencil can be approached like in a different way, right? Like his work is a stencil as well, but he works with layers. So stencil in layers is what defines his work, and that's how I rooted my approach to do this. So he actually has like a color logotype. And the cool thing is that it's color agnostic. So if he's using 2 hues of blue, then he can use like those same colors for the logo, because it would be weird to have like a black logo when everything's like super light pink or blue. So it just wouldn't do it, because it would be like a specific hand to sign his work, which is a bit mad. Yeah, and then you see like how it always gets like a bit of an extra layer, and how you can play with this like this construction. But also something that was really important in this project, or the work that he does, is the square. So the square is really important. So what happens when you don't have like that many letters that allow you to understand the proportion of the letters, that they are squared? So you start adding like these details, like this is intentionally flat here and here as well. That peak, like everything starts to basically, they want to blow up until the edge and just like to take space, take as much space as possible while still retaining some balance. So on that note of taking space and pushing for things, I also like to play around with things that I haven't really done before. And that was like, this is a working font, but it's made with gradients. So it's quite abstracted, and it's very intentional because it was part of an invitation that I got to do like a poster for this indie publication based in Lisbon. But then I also wanted to write an essay. And in the poster, you have like Párias Párias, which is the name of the indie company, and the colophon with shades that allow themselves to be read and called letters. So what I ended up writing about was very much that letters and type are always being perceived as a container of something. They're not the meaning itself, but they carry the meaning of whatever subject you want to talk about. And that is really unfair. Like, letters can be the subject by themselves. So what I tried to do, I felt like, okay, so there's like a typeface, there's a poster, there's like like some words about it, but there's not enough. Like, I wanted to actually people to feel this. So what I ended up doing was just like to code a poster where you only need to write your text, and then it outputs like a graphic expression. So in that sense, you end up being like an artist with your own words, but it's just like a tool that is like slightly more complex than a pen for you to express yourself. So you can write something completely meaningless, but just creates like a pattern that you like. And I think that's something that is important to think about typefaces, is that you can go beyond the letters. You can break like those rules and do something like a little bit different. Technology is great, but is really, and I cannot stress this enough, it's really, really important to look back and look at what people have done. So let's pay our respects and go to one of the most amazing places in Lisbon, which is Cemitério dos Prazeres, which is like a type specimen book, like out in the open. So if you see like that little detail, now imagine this being like a huge place. You see like this typeface, and this typeface has like some quirks, and at some point I thought like, yeah, that's cool, but it still feels very like familiar. So let me just have a look around, and there's my name, really old school, as you can see. Like seeing things, for instance, like this image, it felt like Photoshop, like these shades. It feels like it's not stone. This was made in stone. It's crazy, like how can you get to that level of detail? So you get to these places, and it's like a never-ending source of inspiration, and it can be really, really fun. Basically, it says, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, last words. So I felt really bad that I wanted to laugh really loud when I saw this, but it was just, oh my God, I just kept thinking of like, what happened? What happened that was like that important that they just, yeah, that's gonna be my afterlife. That's how I'm gonna be known. So thinking about, or talking about afterlife, here it's written Eudóxio, and Eudóxio Azevedo is one of the founders of the Socialist Party in Portugal. And he was just there, chilling, and I was looking at the type with his name, and I was like, your type is pretty cool. Maybe I can trace it. Maybe there's something about that that feels a little bit too right-wing, so how can I counter that with a small sample that I had? So this was the letters that were present, and then these were like the repetition of those same letters. So when I look at this, it was like a really narrow sample. So if it's a really narrow sample, I don't want to do like a revival, because I don't have enough information, and there was not enough information to source to do something that it's like, okay, I want to understand why this typeface, why in this year, what's like the historical bit of it, like behind it. So I dig deep a little bit, but it was not enough. So I embraced that, just like to flex the system and to do something that just didn't exist. So this is the closest one to the root. And then when I was talking about variable font, it's like single font file that's true code you can manipulate and just make it flex. So you can have a logo that is always flexible if it's set as a typeface, for instance. And then this is a typeface that I want to sell, so I need to think about how to sell typefaces, how to promote them, how to design them. And I did like a small partnership with a friend that works in 3D just to help me to put this together. But the cool thing about Nyaku is that it was not only like a political activist, it was also a sculptor. So it actually worked in type design. And it's not the kind of thing that you expect when you go to a cemetery to be like, okay, I'm going to look for someone that works in type design and let's hope for the best to have like good type on top of his body. So it's just like sometimes you just need to be out there to be exposed to opportunities just make sense for you personally, for you like depending on your own context and the things that you like. So yeah, like more type. I think it's a lot lighter now. Like I gave the hard bit in the beginning, and I'm just like trying to keep things a little bit more light. And then I wanted to do like this kind of an activist or activism sort of design, just like to reinforce the root of this project. And then you also have like alternative characters. Like this is the original one, but politically that gets into a difficult territory. So the red one gives you like an alternate, like in this typeface. And then it just like as many things, like you do the work, I finished the type design work, but then I need to test, I need to play around with it. And then you end up like doing like these sort of layouts because it helps you to understand like you have different weights, but you have like different words, like what are the pairing of those letters? Do they sit well next to each other? Like you don't really need to reinvent the O because it's so simple, so it's quite challenging and will just like stand out too much. So you need to test like to understand what are like the letter pairs that are gonna appear. So yesterday when I was driving back home, I was thinking like how should I end this conversation about type? And like I said, like I don't want to basically just like geek out to the point where you don't know what I'm talking about. But I think it's important, like I'm really into music, and as I mentioned before, like punk hardcore. And this is something that I was listening yesterday, and it just makes sense to share this. Because you always think that you're working in a niche, you always think that you're doing something that is like too weird or not big enough to be expanded. But then like generation after generation, we end up finding like opportunities to do like new things, to create things that don't exist. And I think that's something that it's really important and probably the biggest takeaway if you don't care absolutely anything about type, which is fine. And to answer that old question, do we need more fonts? I hope that I don't have to say more than this with the presentation that I've shared so far, because it can take you to so many places from a creative point of view. Culturally, it's a really good tool to look back at your own history, the history of other countries, writing systems. So yeah, we need more fonts. Technology keeps evolving. How do we read in the VR space? How do we read in AR? Like what happens when you have depth? Like there's many things to be answered, and I've answered a few, hopefully. So thank you very much.